Sports shape lives, build communities, and drive billion-dollar industries. Yet their true impact often goes unnoticed.
From personal growth and well being to career potential, it's time to rethink what sports can do. This is the Why Not Sports podcast. All right, welcome to the Why Not Sports podcast, a podcast where we dive into the business and community side of sports. Today, we are honored to welcome John Bishop.
John Bishop is a seasoned sports industry executive with a track record of driving revenue growth and operational excellence across major sports organizations. He currently serves as vice president of PlayFly Max at PlayFly Sports, where he leads innovative efforts to help collegiate athletic departments maximize NIL opportunities and unlock new revenue streams through tailored and data-driven strategies. Before joining PlayFly, he gained his first experience in sports as the assistant general manager of the Durham Bulls, where he first learned the operational intricacies of running a sports franchise. He used this knowledge to transition to the NBA, where he spent over 12 years, most recently as associate vice president of team marketing and business operations. In this role, he played a key part in enhancing ticket sales, sponsorship development, premium seating, and marketing strategies for teams across the NBA, WNBA, and G League. Additionally, he was instrumental in launching 14 NBA Development League franchises, working closely with the Cleveland Cavaliers, Golden State Warriors, Philadelphia 76ers, and many more. With deep experience in sports business and a commitment to strategic innovation, John continues to shape the future of revenue generation in sports.
John Bishop, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate the opportunity to share my experiences and hopefully be of help.
Absolutely. No, John, we're really grateful to have you. And the first question that we love to ask our guests is, so John, what's your sports story?
Yeah, so look, I grew up a sports fan. I think like many do. I didn't really think of it as a career, though. I actually came to Texas A&M as an animal science major, and I thought I'd kind of follow the path of a lot of others in my family who were working in agriculture. And I think maybe my sophomore year decided, no, I think I want to go down a different path. And so part of that was going to the athletic department and asking them if they had any openings for, student workers, and was able to get a job as a student employee within the athletic department under marketing and promotions. And so it was kind of like, oh, cool, I'm going to get that experience. I also went across town to KBTX TV, where they were hiring some folks for their Friday football show and also doing some work there during the week. And so getting some experience on the media side. And so kind of worked for both of those entities while I was in school for a couple of years. And, I had to kind of decide like, okay, which path do I want to go down? Is it the media path or maybe working, for a university or on the team side? I have to tell you, the answer came naturally. I was working at KBTX one day, and they let me kind of do some work on the mic, and I thought, man, I'm not very good at this. I'm going to have to spend years getting better, or maybe I just go the other path. And so that's how I ended up at the Durham Bulls. I sent out resumes. This was back in the olden days where really some teams didn't even have websites back in the 90s, and I sent out resumes and got an opportunity to interview with the Durham Bulls. At that time, they were moving from single A ball to triple A. Major League Baseball was just going through an expansion. And so drove to Durham for an interview, and they offered me a job. And so that got me started really kind of on the ticket sales side of the business. And so that's where a lot of opportunities lie. I think if for those looking to get in sports, sometimes, that might be where the most jobs are present themselves is in ticket sales. But it was a great experience because I didn't think of myself as somebody that would get into the sales side of the business. But after a couple of months and some, maybe some bumps in the road, I think I realized that, it really wasn't selling. I think I was doing a lot of problem solving for folks and making recommendations on whether it's season tickets or groups or really an array of products that we had at that time, mini plans, et cetera. And I started really kind of get a feel for it and get into a rhythm. And so spent the next several years in Durham really kind of building up those ticket sales skills, leading a department, eventually taking those skills and moving over to the partnership side of the business and selling partnerships and leading that group and really leading all the revenue streams for the organization for a number of years before, after 13 seasons with the Durham Bulls, one of my first year coworkers, who is now at the NBA, reached out and said, hey, what do you think about coming to work at the NBA league office? And I thought, man, never in my wildest dreams growing up on a little farm in Pflugerville, Texas, that I would have the opportunity to do that. And I, kind of went through the process and ended up getting offered a job there right as the 2011-2012 basketball season was starting. Went to work for the NBA in a group called Team Marketing and Business Operations. That is a group that was essentially started by Commissioner Stern as a way to get teams communicating on the business side. They weren't really doing that for a really long time. I think they kind of felt like, hey, basketball, we're going to keep secrets, and business, we're going to keep secrets. And I think Commissioner Stern was really forward thinking in telling the teams that, look, hey, we're all in different markets. You had 2 teams in New York and 2 teams in LA, but for the most part, we're all in different markets. Is there a way for us to be sharing best practices, helping each other get better on the business side? And everybody bought in eventually, and it staffed up a group that would go from team to team, collecting and sharing best practices, and really kind of trying to take the business to the next level, and really in every vertical as well. And so I got to do that for 13 seasons at the NBA, and as you mentioned, doing a lot of work in the G League, WNBA as well, across all of our leagues. It was really a tremendous experience, and in fact, I thought I may just stay there, maybe to retirement or something. And I got a call last April from another former coworker. This time, somebody I'd worked with in Teambo and also the WNBA. And her name's Christy Hedgepeth. Christy was now president of PlayFly Sports. And she said, hey, what do you think about this NIL space? Are you kind of paying attention to it? And I'm like, oh, yeah. I'm actually contributing as an alum to NIL at my alma mater, Texas A&M. And I also, at the same time, have been paying a lot of attention to it. Just kind of a big college sports fan, and I was curious about the space. And so she's like, well, that's great. What do you think about coming and working for us and leading our NIL group? And I was like, no, like it's that NIL space is kind of crazy. Yeah. It sounds too tumultuous for now. I think I'm going to pass. Even though I'd heard all these great things about PlayFly, I thought, it's just not the right move. But we continued to talk over the course of a couple of months, and one thing led to another. And on July 15th, I started with PlayFly, leading a new division called PlayFly Max. And PlayFly Max, really, I think you explained it there at the beginning, that we have a focus on driving NIL for student athletes at the schools in which we're present. In addition, driving incremental revenues for universities as they move into this new world of revenue share, where they're taking on a lot of new expenses as part of the new revenue share system coming out of the House settlement. So we've launched at 4 schools so far: Penn State, LSU, Baylor, and UTSA. I think you'll hear news of us launching at a number of other schools here in the coming months. And you guys are at Texas A&M. On the last day of February, we announced that Texas A&M would be not only a new partner in the multimedia rights space, but also with NIL, and us having a significant impact, working on the NIL space at Texas A&M. That kind of catches you up.
Yeah, for sure. So
that was awesome. Yeah.
Kind of backtracking into that story, a lot of your career changes revolved around your relationships that you were able to accumulate throughout your career. What advice do you have for young professionals that are kind of in that kind of early stage and looking to build those relationships?
Yeah, it's number one on the list. These relationships, you may think, in fact, when I went to Durham, the way the position was structured, I was only supposed to be there for 10 months. And so, it had an end date. It wasn't really a kind of a full-time year-round position. And so I think it's easy sometimes to go into those type of roles, internships, maybe short-term positions in sports, especially early on in your career, whether you're doing it while you're in college or shortly after. You kind of think, oh, these things are going to run out and I'll move on to the next thing. Well, what I thought would be 10 months became 13 years. And I think I was smart in the fact that I didn't treat it like I was going to be there for 10 months. I treated it from day one. I treated it like I was going to be there, for a long time, because I love the place. And developing relationships along the way is important. But I would say just as important as developing relationships, you got to work hard, because everybody's paying attention. And people that you may think are, maybe my peer, I'm not really trying to impress my peer. I'm kind of trying to impress my boss or my boss's boss. Well, no, in each of those cases, it was my peer that eventually reached out to me about the next opportunity, not somebody that I was reporting to. So everybody's watching. And so, you want to be a good person. You want to develop relationships. You want to value those relationships. But as importantly, you want to show that you can produce and you're reliable and, you're someone that's going to show up to work every day, because, again, everybody's watching. And, it may pay off 13 years down the road when somebody calls and says, hey, I was thinking about you for this role.
Absolutely. And kind of what are some mistakes that a lot of, young professionals in this industry tend to make?
Yeah, I think sometimes you can think early on about maybe the compensation as being like the end all be all of a job in sports, because it can be frustrating early on. Traditionally, sports jobs have not paid as well as similar jobs in other industries. Part of that is the demand. A lot of people want to work in sports, it's kind of a fun place to work. You might get a championship ring or get to spray champagne on each other at the end of the season. So, right, it's you don't get to do that, maybe over at the bank or the insurance company. But at the same time, you may be sacrificing some compensation early. And I think some people kind of dial into that a little too much. And I know it's easy to say when it's like, I'm an old guy now, and it's like, but looking back, my decision to go to Durham wasn't a financial one. In fact, they're paying me just a little more than minimum wage to go and take that job. I had a job in College Station already. It was actually pretty decent and paid well. So I kind of take a leap of faith. And I think sometimes you can look at a role and think, man, the comp isn't there, so I'm just going to not do it. Maybe I'll jump into sports later. I think the earlier you can get in and start, it's kind of like, in free agency. It's like the earlier you can start the clock, the next free agent contract is kind of earlier as well. I think you have to think about that way in working in sports as well. And I think too many people sort of think it short term versus kind of having a long term strategy.
No, we love sports metaphors on this show. And I think that's a good point. What kind of framework or decision-making process do you go through when making big decisions like that? I mean, that's a huge decision. I mean, you went to North Carolina, growing up in Texas, you go to A&M, like this university that you love, good paying job in College Station, close to the athletic department. What went into that? And every time that you made a change, kind of how do you go through it, mentally? Do you take into account, people factors, like your family, kind of your career? Is kind of a gut instinct to it?
Those decisions are the hardest ones you'll make in your life, right? It's like, other than maybe the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with, outside of that, your career decisions end up being really important because they impact those other people. When I took, these jobs at the athletic department and at KBTX, these were jobs while I was in college. I was making a decision for one person. The next time I had to make a decision was going to Durham, North Carolina, and I had just gotten married. And so now I'm making a decision for two people, and I'm not making a decision. Two people are making a decision together, go and do that. When I went to the NBA, now I'm making a decision for four people because we've got two kids, right? And the same with PlayFly. Now, our kids are sort of grown. And actually, we have one that's a freshman at Texas A&M. We have another one that graduated from Ole Miss recently. And so maybe I'm kind of back to making a decision for two people. But I think in each of those instances, you really do have to kind of think through, okay, here's kind of all of the reasons why yes, here's all the reasons why no. And in the end, you may end up going with your gut. And there were, for the jobs that I've taken, there were probably 25 other opportunities that I passed on. And some of those I can look back and say, that was probably a mistake. There was some kind of, amazing opportunity that I passed on. But I think for the most part, I can look back and with very little regret on the jobs that I didn't take. I think it helped me to stay where I was. But yeah, they are tough. You want to have mentors and peers that you can go to during those situations as well. I've heard people say you want to have your own board of directors. You want to have someone that you can go to, or a group of people that you can go to and ask their opinion. You don't have to take it. They can weigh in, and maybe there's some component that they can weigh in on. It could be about the relocation more so than the job. It could be about, hey, thinking about this job, does it help you get to the next job that you really want to be in? And so having those mentors and people you can rely on, whether they're family members, friends, coworkers, boss, whatever it may be, I think that's important to have in your decision making. You don't have to go at it alone.
Yeah, so ultimately you ended up making that difficult decision to have a career transition and get into the multimedia rights space. Can you kind of describe the multimedia rights space to a 10-year-old or someone, who doesn't have the experience kind of in the sports field, and kind of just explain what PlayFly Max's role is within PlayFly as a broader organization?
Sure. So I would say the easiest way to explain it would be that multimedia rights typically means the sponsors that you see on campus within the athletic venues, on radio, like anybody that's sort of associated with, we'll use Texas A&M as an example, since you guys are there on campus. You walk into Kyle Field and you see a Wells Fargo sign, or you see a Rudy's sign. Those are all sold by the multimedia rights provider. And if you listen to the game on the way home, it's those commercials that are run on radio are the multimedia rights provider that is selling those spots. And so it's interesting. You're like, well, why wouldn't an NBA team have a multimedia rights provider, or an MLB team? Because they choose to sort of self-operate in the space. Mm-hmm. So at the NBA, I would say, if I was going to visit the Memphis Grizzlies, they would have a sponsorship sales team that is dedicated to selling those sponsorships. You go on campus, and I think, it's a couple of decades ago now, a lot of these universities decided, this isn't our area of expertise. We're going to bring in a third party who is going to sell this stuff for us, and we'll, pay them a fee to do that. And so that was sort of how it all started. Well, today it's evolved into kind of, I would say, the preferred way in which universities sell their partnerships, their sponsorships. I use those words interchangeably, by the way. And so they would go out and find this multimedia rights company. The multimedia rights company is, in essence, making a bet. They're saying, I'm going to give you X dollars and you can go cash this check and you don't have to worry about it. We're going to hire the staff. We're going to make all the sales calls. We're going to purchase the signage. We're going to do it all. And the multimedia rights company is thinking, we feel like we can make a profit off of that guaranteed amount, or that bet that we made to get the business. Hopefully that kind of describes a little bit of like what multimedia rights companies do in coming in and kind of providing that service for a university athletic department.
Yeah, for sure. And then can you just dig deeper into PlayFly Max specifically?
Sure. So PlayFly Max is a new division that was created by PlayFly, I would say out of necessity. The number 1, 2, and 3 topics when you talk to an athletic director are NIL and what we're going to do to help recruiting and retention of athletes so that we can be competitive in every sport. And so, these multimedia rights providers, I think, were called to action because it's only natural for them, when they're out talking to these sponsors, to begin to incorporate NIL into these deals. So, if you're talking to a Rudy's again, or Whataburger, or whoever it may be natural to say, hey, we have all of these student athletes on campus, some of which would be great brand representatives for you going forward. In fact, we know that the quarterback loves Whataburger. And so, why don't we bring these two brands together? And so it made sense for the multimedia rights provider to have an NIL strategy. Since we're already on campus, we're already talking to partners. And so Max was sort of founded on that principle, that we can help these schools that we have partnerships with to grow NIL revenue, which is a priority for them. But also at the same time, how can we help them grow incremental revenues? And when I talk about incremental revenues, I go back to the House settlement. So the House settlement, I'll do that as a 10-year-old as well, but the House settlement is really settling a lawsuit that a former student athlete brought against the NCAA, saying, hey, we didn't have the opportunity to have NIL back when I played. We want to create a class action lawsuit to win back some of those funds that we didn't have the opportunity for. And the settlement is going to, in essence, create a scenario where universities will pay approximately $2 million in back payments to those student athletes over the last 10 years. And they're going to do that every year for a decade. Also, to start paying the student athletes that are on campus now a portion of the revenue that will begin to take place this coming athletic season in the fall. And that's going to be, for Power 4 schools, that's going to be about $20.5 million in year one. So you got $2 million in new expenses for past settlement. You've got $20.5 million for going forward. Also, the House settlement creates new scholarship opportunities in some sports. Some sports were very limited, like baseball, for example, had 11.7 scholarships that you were allowed to use for the entire team. Well, they're going to open that up. I believe 35 is the new number. So in order to be competitive, like a Texas A&M or Tennessee, anybody in the SEC, you're going to want to do max out on scholarships so that you have a chance to win the conference or be competitive in the conference. those new scholarship expenses also are in addition to that already $22.5 million. So, I mean, you could be looking at 25, upwards of $30 million in new expenses. So back to Max, how can we help create incremental revenues to help begin to counter some of those new expenses? And we can do that through creation of events. We can do that through a membership program where, fans could, subscribe to on an annual basis or a monthly basis to get content or to get swag or to get access to events. All of these kind of other incremental revenue streams are things that we see as opportunities to help our schools as they're going through this time where the expenses just kind of went, way up and real fast.
Yeah, so kind of adding on to that, PlayFly, relatively new company, I believe 4 years old, into a space with a lot of established competitors. How is PlayFly separating themselves and kind of getting innovative in a time where innovation's needed with all the kind of pending litigation and changes occurring in the collegiate sports landscape?
Yeah. So, I mentioned earlier, Christy Hedgepeth, who is president of PlayFly Sports, she came from the NBA. She was actually COO for the WNBA as well. And I think the one thing the NBA taught us was to be innovative and to find new revenue streams. And I think that's where PlayFly wants to be. It's kind of like not kind of the traditional multimedia rights company. Wayne Gretzky once said, you want to skate to where the puck is going, right? And I think that's what we want to do. We want to be out in front and be kind of thinking ahead about what's next. So I'll think about my time at the NBA. When I started there in that 2011-2012 season, there were two logos on the floor. It was the team logo and the arena logo. That was it. Like, you walked in, that was all you saw. There were no sponsors on the jerseys. It was, pretty bare bones. Maybe people liked it better then, but, it's like, they're NBA teams are trying to generate as much revenue as possible. And so over the course of the next several years, new inventory became available. And so one of those pieces of new inventory was the jersey patch. And when you think about that came along in 2017-18 season. I had friends that work in Major League Baseball. They were like, oh, you're sold out. Look at, got the logo on the jersey. Of course, they're doing it now. Maybe like 7 years too late, right? You missed out on 7 years of revenue. Right. By waiting so long to make that move. However, that was a game changer. And so you went from, even that first year, you went from making $0 off of the jersey to that first year, I believe we maybe had 20 some odd teams that sold that patch, and maybe it was $50 million in total new revenues across the board. Today, that's $300 million. Average patch in the NBA is $10 million. And so $300 million per year in new revenue streams allow you to do a lot of, cool and interesting things. The courts, if you look at the court, like I said, two logos. Now you turn on a game. You turn on a game tonight, and you'll see the floor's full of them, right? And they're virtual. It's like it'll change each time you run down the floor. If you're watching ball games, a lot of that came, when we were in the bubble during COVID. Some innovation kind of had to take place. It's like, oh, how do we play in a bubble and still activate on all these sponsorships that each team had? Oh, let's do virtual logos on the floor. And each team, as we cycle in a new team in the bubble, will have, their logos on the floor. And so that stuck. And so we still use it today. But that was kind of innovation out of necessity. But, you see where, able to increase revenue streams. And third, I would say an international focus. I think the NBA did a wonderful job of not only focusing on international audience, but also partnerships and really kind of opening that up. Traditionally, that was sort of a limitation for teams to be able to go internationally and sell partnerships. There's just a lot of rules around it because at the end of the day, you're trying to keep things even as much as possible from a competitive standpoint. And like a Lakers or eventually the Warriors would have a significant advantage if they were able to go overseas and just make as much money as they wanted. So there were some limitations in what you could do, but that opened up and it created new revenue streams. So I say all that because we think about college athletics. A lot of those things haven't been unlocked yet, whether it's jersey patch or logos on the floor or on the field. Tennessee put logos on the field last year. A few teams have started to do that, but it's still like very early stages. I think you're going to see more evolving in this space to look probably a little more like the professional sports. And I know that gives a lot of people angst. I think it's like there's been so much change in college athletics over just the last few years. I think people are like, oh my God, I can't believe all that's changed. And, it's not what it used to be, right? But that change is going to continue, and it's going to continue because there is going to be a need for athletic departments to, just secure more revenue to counter those new expenses.
Absolutely, John. And I think, we come from a Latin American background. I mean, Enzo's from Brazil. I'm from Mexico. I mean, if you see the soccer jerseys there, like they're full of sponsors, right? Like almost
Oh, yeah.
the whole
Right.
canvas is covered up in something. And so, which that might be like kind of the extreme end. But when the NBA started getting sponsors, I mean, when Frost Bank started sponsoring the San Antonio Spurs, I was excited about that. I mean, local bank, great story. I mean, it was HEB before Frost Bank actually, so even better. But for you personally, John, I'm really curious. You're an industry insider and you are a fan. We see you at the basketball games. We actually saw you a few weeks ago. We went to the Tennessee game. So which changes in the sports landscape kind of excite you the most, and which ones concern you?
Oh, it's a great question. Okay, so excite me. I think the exciting thing is that live sports is still the place where people congregate. It's still the place where people go and consume something together. Not necessarily they're in the same room all the time, but the next day at work, that's what they're talking about. And when I was growing up, you could do that with TV shows. I mean, a TV show would come on at Thursday night at 8 o'clock, and everybody would be talking about that TV show the next day at work. Well, that's not really how TV is consumed much anymore. I mean, a little bit, but that's very much more fragmented. I'm just excited that sports have continued to kind of bring people together in a way that very few other mediums and platforms can do. And so I think that's really exciting. I think that, and I think the future is bright as we go, kind of continue down that path. And so that's what's always excited me about being in sports. I mean, I got to go to work at a place where people are just having, so much joy, so sometimes you lose and it's like not so joyful. Maybe that Tennessee game that you just mentioned, we didn't win that, but
absolutely.
That's what makes the win so much sweeter though, right? It's like the losses. I remember going years ago, we were a Tampa Bay Rays affiliate and went to an ALCS at Fenway Park to watch us try and get to the World Series at Tampa Bay. And I think it's game 5 in Boston. And it was my first time in Fenway. And I thought it was really interesting. On the video board, they were kind of doing the hype video kind of before the game starts.
Yeah.
And the hype video was all these terrible losses that they had. It was really interesting. It was like, Bill Buckner going between his legs and all of these kind of like losses, and then it kind of crescendos with them starting to win and everything. But I think what it was saying is like, you fans that are here, y'all were here for all that.
Yeah.
Like you were here for all the bad stuff, and now you're here for these like great moments. And I think that that's like something that people get in sports, and it's like you want that where it's like those lows are so low, but man, the highs just like it
sure.
makes up for it all. And so I just like proud to be a part of something like that, and I think that will continue. Look, there's new sports coming along. There's new innovation. In fact, I think about. You guys are probably familiar with the Savannah Bananas, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really an interesting concept. I know Jesse Cole, who founded that team, and I think they started it and were kind of like trying to figure it out as they went along. But man, they have crushed it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they kind of took a sport, said, look, here's kind of some of the things that we kind of think could be better. Why don't we just go out and run with this? And they're filling up stadiums.
Yeah, MLB stadiums.
NFL stadiums now. And so I think that's incredible. And so I think there's that too, that innovation that's there. Okay, what scares me about sports? Oh, I don't know.
Or like maybe changes that are happening within sports.
That's a tough one. I think it's just so much change, right? I mean, again, talking about college athletics, you don't want to disenfranchise people who are loyal and have followed this. And I think it's like so much change kind of could turn someone off.
Yeah.
And they leave. So, if you look at NASCAR, during the early 2000s, they made a conscious decision that they were going to expand, and they sort of left a lot of the footprint that they had in the southeastern United States to go, build tracks in Las Vegas and California, and they're trying to have this national brand. And while that was, great at sort of expanding their reach, they left a lot of communities and things behind that had really supported them for a very long time. And I think that's the scary part is, right, you lose touch sometimes in your growth of kind of like who your core fans are. And I think with NASCAR, they sort of lost touch during that time because the sport was at its peak. I would say that sport 20 years ago was really at its peak point, and it hasn't been the same since. And I think it was because they maybe expanded too quickly and left sort of their core fans behind. I think that's something we have to be cognizant of, whether it's college athletics, Major League Baseball, you don't want to sort of go a direction that your core fans don't want you to take.
Yeah, so kind of digging into that, if you were in charge of an athletic department or kind of in a commissioner state in NCAA, kind of surrounding collegiate athletics as a whole, maybe specifically to college football, what are some steps that you would take to kind of preserve the identity of the sport whilst also adapting to the shifts that are occurring?
Yeah, look, I think what we're trying to do post-house, I think has good intention. I think the idea is we are trying to kind of, as much as possible, keep the playing field or level the playing field where it's not NIL just became pay for play. And so there are some restrictions that are going to be put in place. We'll see how it all works. Yeah. Right. We don't have a lot of full visibility in how it works. And also we won't really know until it's put into place. But I like where we're going with that. I do believe that student athletes should have the opportunity to maximize their name, image, and likeness. I think it's kind of a tragedy that for all this time, like couldn't have a job, like that, you couldn't earn money outside of, work, playing football. And you couldn't earn money while you're playing football. I mean, the ability to do that, I think is a win. I'm not sure everyone agrees. I think, the one thing that seems to cause the most controversy in college athletics is the transfer portal and sort of the easy access of moving from place to place. And I think there's some things that will probably fix that over time. In fact, I think if, maybe if I was commissioner, I might go towards more of a collective bargaining agreement like professional sports have, where, the student athletes have a seat at the table and, can, be part of the negotiation and, they have just a representation in the process. I think that'll happen eventually. And I think all of these steps that have been taken are working towards that. And so I think that's good. I think it's never probably been a better time to be a student athlete in college athletics. So it means we're going in the right direction. But maybe some of a collective bargaining agreement could also maybe have the student athletes stay a little longer at their schools, kind of like what you would see with a professional contract versus, kind of hopping, 5 schools in 5 years kind of thing.
Yeah, especially in a sport like the NBA or in basketball, right? Where you kind of lose touch with the brand power that a college program can bring, right? Like back in the day, like Patrick Ewing or Tim Duncan, Wake Forest back in the day.
Yeah, right
now.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason why Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are so popular is because that rivalry built up, like those 3 or 4 years that they were in college basketball.
No, you're exactly right, and that's been another thing that's been amazing to follow is like WNBA. I was working there during a time where it seemed like it was hard to kind of like get to the next step, and there would be influxes of talent from time to time, but it was sort of hard to get the WNBA into the national spotlight. And man, now you watch what happened really over the last year with what Indiana Fever and Caitlin Clark, and then certainly the couple of years before that with Iowa and LSU and South Carolina and UConn all having these star power maybe like we haven't seen. It's really been transformational for the WNBA. And that's the way that's manifested itself is the franchise values have gone through the roof. 100%. And the new franchises are launching, Golden State and Toronto. There's others that are coming online as well. So really great how they were able to kind of capitalize on that moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, John, as we're wrapping up the podcast here, we'd like to give the opportunity to give us a strong closing statement or any last pieces of advice, for people that are, really excited about sports, that have that curiosity of, getting into the industry. I know you touched a little bit at the beginning, but, I mean, this is, your career is amazing. I mean, you've helped, not only working in sports, but also developing it a ton. So, any last tidbits of advice there?
Yeah, thanks. I do think the best time to get started for most folks was a year ago or 2 years ago. The next best time is today, right? Like you want to find experience as early as possible in the process while it's in school. Maybe it's a minor league baseball team that's in your town, or maybe it's the local university and finding a role within the athletic department, or what you guys are doing here, like, taking this to another level by doing a podcast. I think that you want to start and get experience as early as possible so that you can get a little bit of a leg up on the competition. I think a lot of people will kind of go through school, they graduate, and it's like, okay, now it's time to kind of like think about this as a career. I would try and start early. And again, I think having patience, I talked about like not letting, maybe early compensation dictate your moves, but having patience to kind of get through that and stay with a strong organization. I'll share with you, after my first year in Durham, like I said, I started there, making like minimum wage. I actually ended up a few months after I started, I got a full-time job, and it was in group ticket sales. This year, going in the off season after my first year, I was offered a position that had a great title. It was assistant GM, already. I eventually got there with Durham, but like, it was like, oh wow, for 1 year. And it was with a small single A club. The thing about Durham was I was surrounded by a lot of talent.
Yeah.
I was surrounded by a lot of people I was learning from that I realized if I went to the other place, I would have an elevated title. Actually, I'd make a little bit more money too. However, there wouldn't even be anyone to learn from. Like this guy, me, now I'm in charge, right? People are going to be learning from me, and I'm like a year in. I wasn't in that position. If you look at that staff, that very first staff in Durham, there were maybe 18 people on the entire staff. I look at where that staff is today, and I think just a few people. So I'm obviously at PlayFly. The executive vice president of ticket sales for the Indiana Pacers and the Fever was my manager. Okay. My peer in sales is now the president of NYCFC, president and CEO of NYCFC in the MLS. Our marketing guy is now president of Talladega Motor Speedway. Our assistant GM at the time is now president of the LA Clippers. These people also were on a little minor league baseball staff.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was surrounded by that kind of talent. And luckily I kind of figured that out. Like I need to stick around these folks.
Yeah.
Versus go somewhere else. And so you have that patience. Sometimes it's like, oh, I can take this job, it pays a little more, maybe a little better title. But no, like stick around mentors and people that are going to make you better.
Thank you so much for that, John. As our last part of our show, is there anyone that you want to spread good bull to, anyone you want to shout out, and how can listeners stay connected with you and the work of PlayFly?
Sure. No, the list is really long. If I start naming off all the people that, there's so many people that have helped me along the way in my career. It is endless, and I'd forget someone. I tell you, I will say the person that's helped me more than anyone is my wife. So I've been married for it'll be 28 years this May, and
congratulations.
It's someone is there along for the ride every bit of the way. And the best thing about Kelly, my wife, is like, man, every step of the way she was supportive, right? Like every one of these decisions, like you guys said, it's like sometimes you're making a hard decision, sometimes you make no decision at all. You stay put. It's like she was very supportive every single step of the way. So that was cool, and she's been awesome.
No, that's awesome. Shout out to Kelly. Good bull.
Yeah, that's right. Shout out to Kelly for sure. Stay in touch. I would say LinkedIn is a good source because then you're connected with me. I'll be sure and accept. So then your first level connection with me, and you'll feel free to message me on that platform. That's a great way to get into contact and stay there in a professional setting.
All right. Awesome. John Bishop, thank you for joining the show.